Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president has it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi there. And did you hear what she just said about Biden's candidacy? We are about to break it down because the ripple effects from that interview have been spreading far and wide. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. Look, what we just showed you, there is so much to read between the lines there. Remember, Biden himself has been saying that he has made up his mind about staying in the race. But then former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, one of the most powerful Democrats in decades, one of Biden's biggest allies, is telling us that it is now up to the president to decide if he wants to run again or not?
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with.
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. Whatever he decides, we will go with. That just might be the biggest signal yet that Democrats are not at all on the same page. And we've seen it for days now. While some Dems have fallen in line, others remain really, really skeptical about Biden doing another 4 years.
Donald Trump is on track, I think, to win this election and maybe win it by a landslide.
Whether I'm concerned or not, is beside the point. He's going to be our nominee, and we all have to support him.
I am deeply concerned about Joe Biden winning this November.
Joe Biden is our nominee. He is not leaving this race. He is in this race, and I support him.
He just has to step down because he can't win, and my colleagues need to recognize that.
And I'm all in on Joe Biden, and I'm going to make my views very, very clear on that.
And while the dim response from Washington remains mixed, some big names in Hollywood are not pulling any punches. Lifelong Democrat and major party donor George Clooney was one of them, calling for the president to get out of the race in a scathing op-ed in the New York Times today, saying, quote, "The Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big Effin' Deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate," then adding, "We are not going to win in November with this president." All of this while that big NATO summit is happening in Washington right now, which just might give Biden the opportunity to try to save his campaign, just as a Republican-led House Oversight Committee has issued subpoenas over Biden's health now. Let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, so much flip-flopping going on in the Democratic Party right now. We saw how Nancy Pelosi dodged that question there. How is the Biden campaign responding after she said what she said to his first response?
Look, a lot of conflicting opinions here within the Democratic Party. For the most part, though, leadership publicly is still sticking by President Biden. But as you just heard, those comments from Nancy Pelosi, very significant this morning, leaving the door open to President Biden potentially changing his mind. But as you clearly mentioned, the president says he has decided. So she later clarified in the day that her spokesperson did that she still supports President Biden. But it is clear that some very tough conversations are being had among Democrats, and they will continue over the next couple of days. We mentioned that solo press conference tomorrow. A lot of them will be watching that. And also, Gadi, you might be able to see behind me, you see those flags behind me. The president is welcoming world leaders tonight here to the White House as part of that NATO summit celebrating the 75th anniversary of NATO. The president spoke with world leaders today. He had the new British Prime Minister here at the White House just a short time ago, and he is trying to project that image of somebody who is doing the job on the world stage. He's also set to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky again tomorrow, Gadi.
That's a lot of plates to be juggling there. And it seems like we're seeing major donors on edge, especially after those very damning words from George Clooney, of all people. Today, there's this new reporting by NBC News that fundraising is set to drop disastrously this month. What happens then?
Yeah, multiple sources close to the re-election effort tell some of my colleagues, you see them there, that it has been a disastrous start to the month, that it's already disastrous. And one of the sources believes that it could dry up, the fundraising could drop by more than half by the end of this month. Now, the Biden campaign is pushing back on this. The spokesperson saying that, look, the first couple of days of the month have been very strong in terms of grassroots fundraising, but certainly this is something that these donors are having to weigh right now. The president earlier this week was on a conference call with these donors. Some of those sources told us that they weren't buying what the president is selling, but again, you can hear behind me, you might be able to hear the instruments, the president trying to stay focused on the job and trying to look presidential on the world stage and preserving global alliances even as he deals with this political storm domestically. Gadi?
Are you sure that's for the president? Because I feel like all of a sudden everything you're saying has this air of authority. I think they're playing that for you, Gabe. I do want to ask this last question. It does, and just level with me here. It feels like things are spiraling into this cycle of like the White House saying he's going to stay in the race, then the media reporting that, then more allies saying they think he's going to lose and they want somebody else, and the media reporting on that, and then asking the White House about that again, and then the White House getting mad and insisting that he's staying in. You cover the White House. Do you see that like vicious cycle breaking anytime soon?
Look, Gadi, what else is the White House and the campaign going to say at this point? He's in it until he potentially isn't. But I think, as I said, the next couple of days will be critical, not just that solo press conference tomorrow, his first of the year. Then he has a campaign event Friday in Battleground, Michigan. And he's also sitting down for an exclusive interview on Monday now with our colleague Lester Holt. So the campaign says that it will put him in these unscripted environments in order to convince donors, the media, voters as well, and lawmakers that he's in it to win it. But again, Gadi, at this point, who knows what will happen? Who knows what will play out in the next couple of days?
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much, and hopefully a little bit more clarity on Monday when Lester Holt sits down with President Biden in an exclusive one-on-one interview. You can watch a preview on NBC Nightly News that night, and then the full unedited interview in a primetime special at 9 p.m. Eastern on your NBC station and here on NBC News Now. And all this dim-on-dim drama seems to be giving fuel to former President Donald Trump, who returned to the campaign trail last night after a pretty quiet stretch since the debate. After teasing a possible VP pick but not naming anyone, Trump took aim at Democrats, saying the party is in chaos, asking Biden to throw in the towel since his decisive defeat at the debate. As for the VP pick, that is still unknown, but the names floated out there are Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, North Dakota's Governor Doug Burgum, and Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. NBC's Garrett Hake has more.
Former President Donald Trump back on the campaign trail overnight, newly lashing out at President Biden's debate performance.
Joe's own party now wants him to throw in the towel and surrender the presidency after a single 90-minute performance.
Mr. Trump suggesting without evidence that President Biden's poor debate performance was the culmination of a collapsing Democratic cover-up.
They are all co-conspirators in the sinister plot to defraud the American public about the cognitive abilities of the man in the Oval Office.
The former president faced questions about his own mental fitness from within his own party as recently as the GOP primary.
But when you're dealing with the pressures of a presidency, we can't have someone else that we question whether they're mentally fit to do this.
Mr. Trump previewing the platform he'll promote at next week's Republican convention.
And on day one, we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. We have no choice.
And teasing his upcoming choice of a running mate, expected to come from a short list that includes Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
We know who our nominee is. He's going to be the next president of the United States, and his name is...
In a radio interview, Mr. Trump said he was, quote, pretty well set on his VP selection, but might wait even until the convention opens next week to announce his choice, drawing out the drama for maximum political impact.
Gary Hake, thank you. And a reminder, our coverage of the Republican National Convention begins on Monday with the NBC News team headed to Milwaukee. Special coverage starts at 9:30. And a big programming note, Monday, Lester Holt will sit down with President Biden in an exclusive one-on-one interview. You can watch a preview on NBC Nightly News and then the full unedited interview in a primetime special at 9 p.m. Eastern on your NBC station and here on NBC News Now. And after nearly 3 years of legal twists and turns and failed attempts to get the case tossed out, today we saw Alec Baldwin in a New Mexico courtroom on trial for the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins on the set of his film Rust, with both the prosecution and the defense making their opening statements to the jury.
The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin.
An actor playing a character can act in ways that are lethal, that just aren't lethal on a movie set. These cardinal rules, they're not cardinal rules on a movie set.
And joining us now is NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin. Now, Dana, interesting statements there. It almost seems like an appeal to safe gun ownership by one side, but then the other side, the defense saying, wait a minute, we're also talking about an actor here. We've all seen movies. We all know that there's pretend and make-believe, and he's not the armorer. Is that the gist of the case here?
That's exactly what it is. And they both gave really compelling arguments during their opening statements. The state in this case, they want the jury to know that Baldwin was reckless and that he pulled the trigger. And had he not done that, Halyna Hutchins would be alive. The defense, on the other hand, says, look, he is the actor. He was pulling out a prop and had live rounds, which are almost absolutely never allowed on a movie set for this exact reason. They were the responsibility of the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, and the safety coordinator, also known as the first assistant director, Dave Halls, who have both been held accountable for their actions here. So both very compelling arguments, and I could see how both could kind of sway a jury here.
It was pretty captivating. A lot of people leaning forward because they played the 911 call earlier today. Let's take a listen to that.
Had two people accidentally shot on a movie set by a prop gun. We need help immediately. Okay. This ID that yelled at me at lunch because asking about revisions. His mother. Did you see him yell at my protected guns? He's responsible for what happened.
So why did they hone in on that? And what did we hear in that 911 tape?
So the defense played this section during their opening statement, and you hear that's the script supervisor who made that 911 call. And at the very end, she says it was his responsibility. She is referring to Dave Halls, again, that first assistant director who's in charge of doing the safety checks, because the armorer loads the weapon, she checks, she shakes those dummy rounds to make sure they rattle, an indicator that they are not live. She hands it to the first AD. He does a second check. He's allowed to take it to Baldwin, and Baldwin's allowed to do another check if he wants. Wow. But it's ultimately the onus is on them. And so playing that during the opening statement, to hear someone else who was on set, who's visibly upset and saying, you know, kind of some expletives there, he should have checked. It already sows the seed that he is responsible. And this is probably going to be the pattern that we see throughout this 8-day trial. It wasn't Baldwin's fault. The people who were responsible have already been held accountable. We know Dave Halls, he took a plea deal, served 6 months probation. We all know about the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. She is currently serving an 18-month sentence. She was convicted earlier this year for involuntary manslaughter.
And we've also seen prosecutors call the first witness, a Santa Fe police officer. He testified on the stand. Let's take a listen to part of his testimony.
Does it appear to you that Mr. Baldwin is speaking to the other witnesses?
I think he was talking about who would know who's in the room.
Is this an ideal way to separate someone from witnesses?
After looking at it, probably not, but that's what happened.
Was Mr. Baldwin supposed to be talking about the incident?
No, ma'am.
Does he appear to be doing it anyway?
Yes, ma'am.
So it seems like they're talking about Baldwin talking to other people after they were supposed to have been separated, right?
Yeah.
How big of a deal is this in this case?
It's pretty big, because I think what the prosecution was doing in this case was saying, look, he was told to sit down, shut up, don't say anything, don't talk to anyone. But here he is talking to Dave Halls and other crew members that come around. And maybe the prosecution could convince a jury that he's not following this law enforcement's directions. Maybe he doesn't follow the armorers or anyone else who on set tells him to do things, because they, again, want to set him up as reckless, bossy, telling people what to do and not following directions. And this could possibly help the prosecution. But there's another part to this. The defense on cross-examination said, well, why didn't you tell them to stop talking? And he got the officer to admit, you know what, that was my mistake. I should have told them to stop.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite the opening to this case.
Absolutely.
Dana Griffin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And in Texas, so much frustration right now as over 1 million people are still without electricity tonight in the middle of a sweltering heat wave. And things are so bad that people are having to rely on a fast food app to figure out where the power is still off. It has been 2 days since Hurricane Beryl hit Texas, leading to those long lines at gas stations, restaurants, and cooling centers that you see right there. Now, the heat index today is once again peaking at 106 degrees in some areas, and that has forced some hospitals to have to discharge patients to Houston's football stadium instead of their homes where the power is still out. And then listen to this. Things have been so chaotic with the electric grid that people have been turning to the Whataburger restaurant app to track power outages where restaurants appeared to be grayed out because the power company, CenterPoint's, wasn't working until they launched a new tracker today. And Beryl's impact is still being felt in other parts of the country. Its remnants causing more damage across the Midwest and Northeast in the last 24 hours as it continues to stir up severe storms and even tornadoes. And we've got team coverage tonight. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns will have the forecast. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Jay Gray in Houston, where all eyes are on the energy company there. Jay, this is now 3 straight days without power for some people. Can you give us a sense of what people are dealing with right now?
Well, Gadi, it's overwhelming stress for these families who have no air conditioning, no power in their homes. And for many of them, the difference between surviving this and not are areas like this. We're inside what is a cooling center here. It's just closed down. So take that into consideration. They can only stay here for a few hours throughout the day, but this place packed with hundreds throughout the day who come here to cool down, obviously. You've got more than 1 million still without power and dealing with all that entails. So they come here also to charge their phones, charge their computers, get on the internet. You can see all along these hallways, they're filled. You can see the different charging stations where people are. And then there are offshoots off this hallway, several other areas where, again, it's just filled with people who have literally nowhere else to go. They're also distributing food and water to hundreds who show up here and line up for blocks just to get something to sustain them until tomorrow. We talked with one of those out in line today, someone who walked over here to get food and water. And he said, like so many say, that the aftermath of Beryl has been much worse than the actual storm.
The storm wasn't nothing compared to this here. 100 degrees sitting in the house. It's 90 degrees at 12 o'clock midnight. Imagine trying to go to sleep. You're scared to go to sleep because you might don't wake up.
Yeah, and unfortunately, right now, Gadi, there are hundreds of thousands in the Houston area who are going to have to go through that for at least another 24 to 48 hours.
That is such a haunting look at kind of like this oasis that is deserted because it's closed now.
Right.
Jay, how bad is it outside?
Well, at the peak of the heat here, it's 93, 94, but then you add in the humidity, and Houston famous for its humidity here. The heat index is 105 to 108, and so you've got little kids, you've got the elderly. They just can't stay out in that all day. And then consider cleaning up the mess that Beryl left behind in all of that. They've got to have a place to cool down. They've got to have a place to go, and this serves as that place for so many.
Wow. And again, we've been talking a lot about the frustration, a lot of it aimed at CenterPoint right now, and CenterPoint saying that they are trying to have power restored to 1 million customers by the end of today. Does that look like it's going to happen? And what about everybody else?
I think it will be close. I think they'll get close to that, but that's because there were more than 2 million without power once this storm moved through, right? So they've maybe cut it in half by the end of the day. It'll be somewhere around there. But that still leaves 1 million or more without power. And in some of these pockets, Centerpoint has said we could be talking 48 hours, even longer to get things back. And with the heat the way it is right now, that's very difficult.
Jay Cray, what a remarkable look at what people are going through there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And as we mentioned, Beryl's remnants are still wreaking havoc as it moves through the Northeast tonight. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with that forecast. Hey there, Bill.
Gadi, another very active day. And, Western New York at one point had 6 tornado warnings going all at the same time, something that doesn't happen very often. It's calmed down a little bit since then. We still have isolated storms capable of producing tornadoes, especially in central New York and upstate New York, and maybe even an isolated one in here in Vermont and New Hampshire. Not exactly locations we talk about associated with tornadoes often. Now, flash flooding is going to turn into the biggest problem as we head through the overnight hours. You see all the thunderstorms in the mountainous terrain in northern portions of New England. That's trouble. We've already had some areas with roads closed off, and it's still pouring in these areas. These are already the flash flood warnings that we have, and I expect that these will expand here in New Hampshire and the Maine later on this evening. So anyone driving in the high country, be careful. It doesn't take much in the mountains. You get a quick 2-3 inches of rain, and you can get roads washed out. And hopefully that won't be the case, but definitely a possibility because we think we could see isolated totals up to 4 inches in addition to what we've already seen. In numerous spots, we'll get 2 to 3 inches by the time it's all said and done. As far as the heat headlines go, the East is about to get a break. The humidity levels are about to drop a little bit along with the temperatures, at least temporarily. Enjoy it while it lasts. So a lot of these heat advisories and warnings are expiring. Even right now, though, 103 in D.C., 105 in Raleigh, a couple other spots feeling a little bit cooler as some sea breeze has moved into a few spots and also some showers and downpours. Thursday, you'll notice tomorrow, heat index 93 in D.C. It's still going to be 90s, but it's going to feel much better than it did the last couple days. And the same goes for Charlotte. So everyone's hot, just not exceptionally hot. But don't worry, because that's coming back as you expected. Look at Nashville this weekend, 98, 99. Charlotte, 96 on Sunday. D.C., 96. Atlanta, mid-90s. So the heat's going to come back, and it's going to build with a vengeance. And next week looks especially hot in areas on the East Coast. Not exactly what you want to hear. In the West, we did it again, and we could do it again tomorrow, too. Vegas, 118. If we could hit 118 tomorrow, that'd be 3 days in a row. We never even had one 118 day in Las Vegas before this year, and we may do tomorrow 3 in a row. Ridiculous. Temperatures will slowly subside as we go through the weekend, back down to 109 in Vegas. We'll take it, Reading down to 103. But the heat streaks and the stats in the West with this unprecedented long-duration heat wave are really insane. So the weekend forecast, going to downpours on Saturday, not beach weather for the mid-Atlantic. Much of the middle of the country is quiet, but definitely hot. Denver's going to have an incredibly hot stretch going on. And then as we head through Saturday, more storms on the East Coast. Sunday, those shift down to the southeast, but still sizzling across the country, Gadi. A temporary break from the heat, but it's going to come roaring back next week.
Ridiculous. You said it, Bill Cairns. Thank you so much. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, searching for answers in a college town after a student is found dead in a river. Allegations of hazing under investigation. What the girlfriend of the Dartmouth college student is saying tonight as she and her family cope with the unthinkable. Plus, the rush to rescue a driver who dropped hundreds of feet off a cliff. The extreme lengths crews needed to go in order to save his life. And later this hour, the rollout of humanoid technology. Think Will Smith and iRobot kind of stuff, because the race to build the best and the fastest tools and who is leading the way is coming up in tonight's Future of Everything.
This is the biggest market in the world. I mean, effectively, this has the potential to change the way we live and work pretty dramatically.
Hey, welcome back, and here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Senator Bob Menendez's lawyers are wrapping up closing arguments in his federal corruption trial, saying prosecutors have not been able to prove any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, prosecutors will finish their rebuttal tomorrow after arguing that cash, gold bars, and a luxury convertible were all bribes from Menendez's co-defendants. If convicted, Menendez could face decades in prison. In Tampa Bay, baseball player Wander Franco is facing sexual abuse charges. The shortstop was indicted in the Dominican Republic. He's charged with abusing a 14-year-old girl there, and the girl's mother is also charged. Franco hasn't played for the Rays since last summer. His trial has been set to start on August 14th. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell is expressing new concern over holding high interest rates. Powell says it could jeopardize economic growth if they're held too high for too long. And Powell is testifying to both the House and Senate on Capitol Hill this week. And thousands of Samsung workers are walking off the job in South Korea. Union workers there went on strike on Monday, but today they say they are staying off the job indefinitely. They're accusing management of not negotiating benefits like higher pay, and Samsung says there haven't been any disruptions on production lines. And remember learning about the shot heard round the world? Well, 250-year-old musket balls have been found in a Massachusetts park, and we don't know if they were the one, but they do actually date right back to that exact time frame that sparked the Revolutionary War in 1775, when colonists fired on the British and started the battles of Lexington and Concord. And there are still so many unanswered questions after a student at Dartmouth College was found dead in a river over the weekend. The loss leaving his loved ones in shock. NBC's Emily Akeda has the very latest.
Juan Zhang dreamt of winning a Nobel Prize. A biomedical engineering major at Dartmouth College, international student mentor, and guitar player in a band. Something he started with girlfriend Lydia Jin.
He was the brightest soul on this campus, and he did not deserve what happened to him.
On Sunday, Zhang's body was found 65 feet offshore in the Connecticut River. The 20-year-old was last seen the night before at a social gathering near the Dartmouth boathouse, according to authorities. Jin, who was not there, says he didn't know how to swim.
When we found out, it was horrible. There are all those stages of grief, and they all kind of happen all at the same time, except for the acceptance part.
While Hanover police say there are no signs of foul play, the chief has said they're looking into the potential of hazing and involvement of alcohol, though haven't released any evidence. Now, the two Greek organizations that attended the party, according to a source familiar with the investigation, have been suspended, including the fraternity Zhang was a member of, Beta Alpha Omega, which the school says was already on alcohol probation. The organization has not commented. Tonight, as investigators seek answers, Jin hopes for change.
Hopefully there will be measures taken at some point so that this will never happen again to anyone, and no one will have to suffer like he did or like we are right now.
Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
Emily, thank you. And more outrage tonight in Milwaukee after a black man was held down by 4 hotel security guards and then later died. Some of what happened was caught on cell phone camera, and his family is now calling for criminal charges to be filed and for transparency. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa is following the latest from Milwaukee, and a warning: some of that video is disturbing.
From his mouth. To see them beat him repeatedly over and over and over again. They didn't stop. They could have stopped. They could have let him go, and they didn't.
Tonight in Wisconsin, a distraught wife demanding justice in the death of Devontae Mitchell after family says they viewed surveillance video from Milwaukee's Hyatt Regency Hotel that showed the 43-year-old husband and father running scared through the lobby on Sunday, June 30th, at one point ducking into a women's restroom before police say being detained by hotel security, leading to this moment.
Stay down! Please stop fighting! Please stay down!
Cell phone video recorded by a witness shows Mitchell, who family says may have been suffering from a mental health episode, crying out as he's held face down by 4 people identified by police as hotel security, one appearing to notice the witness.
When you go into the ladies' room.
Milwaukee police saying Mitchell had fought with security guards who detained him until police arrived. They say officers found Mitchell unresponsive and he later died. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump says one of the men who held him down, a front desk employee, claims he told security guards Mitchell couldn't breathe but was ordered to keep holding him.
To the district attorney, we don't know what else we need to present to you to bring charges.
More than a week after Mitchell's death, the DA says they're still awaiting full autopsy results, but they're investigating this case as a homicide. Meanwhile, Hyatt says the group that manages the hotel has suspended the employees involved. Back to you.
Maggie Vespa, thank you. And coming up, the manhunt for a suspected crossbow-wielding killer in the UK is now over after 3 women were found dead in a London home. We're going to tell you how police tracked down the suspect there. But first, you got to see this. Some terrifying moments in Arizona on Sunday as teams worked to help a driver who crashed their car and fell off a cliff near a highway, falling 200 feet into the mountains. The rescue effort was straight heroic. Take a look.
Am I hear you, buddy? Stay with me. Stay with me, buddy. I know. I see you.
Now, it's hard to see in the dark, but you can see a medic coming down from a helicopter and going all the way down in between the mountain tops in the darkness there. Hanging from a rope, that medic got the driver out, got him onto safe ground, and the driver made it out alive, but is pretty badly hurt. We'll be right back after the break. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. A wife of a late Islamic State leader was sentenced to death in an Iraqi court today, saying she was complicit in crimes committed against a group of women captured by the militant group. Now, the decision comes almost 10 years since the Islamic State attacked those women. The campaign, the UN says, amounts to genocide. And now to a courtroom in Russia where a judge ordered the arrest of a widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny on charges of an alleged involvement in an extremist group. This morning, she blasted the ruling on X, saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin is the one who should be put behind bars. And France's former First Lady Carla Bruni Sarkozy has been charged with witness tampering in her husband's campaign case. That has to do with an investigation into alleged financing from Libya of Nicolas Sarkozy's 2007 presidential campaign. She's been ordered not to talk to anyone involved in the case except for her husband. And finally, a royal reveal at Buckingham Palace. For the first time, fans will soon be able to visit the East Wing, a portion of the estate that was once off limits. Instead of looking up at the balcony, visitors will now be able to look down from it, and they'll also be able to tour the yellow drawing room and walk down the principal corridor. The doors will open next week, and tickets are already sold out. And at least 25 people are dead in Gaza after a school-turned-shelter was struck near the city of Khan Yunis. NBC verified this video that shows people playing soccer in the schoolyard at the time of the attack, and a warning, which you're about to see, is disturbing. The UN Refugee Agency says it's one of 4 schools that have been attacked in just 4 days. And NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley has more.
Well, there were heavy bombardments all across the Gaza Strip by the Israelis over the past several days. One of them stood out yesterday in particular when an Israeli strike against a school or a campus that was housing a lot of displaced Palestinians from elsewhere in Gaza Strip killed nearly 30 people and injured dozens more. Now, this was apparently a strike that the Israelis said was against a Hamas operative who they said was hiding out in the school. Now, UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, they have said that this was a strike against the 4th school in as many days, and they are saying that the death toll is continuing to climb. And Palestinian health officials have said that the death toll is now well above 38,000 ever since those initial October 7th attacks that set off this latest round of fighting. Now, as these continued strikes are going on, it's clear that the Israelis' message that they are no longer in the intensive phase of the fight against the Gaza Strip isn't really happening. They've said time and again that they're entering into a phase C or phase 3 of their war in the Gaza Strip, but we're still continuing to see bombardments across that Palestinian enclave, including on places that the Israelis had since evacuated earlier and told a lot of citizens to leave. So it seems as though the intensive phase of the fight is still ongoing, but there are efforts to bring some level of peace to the Gaza Strip. We're now seeing that some diplomats are huddling in Doha from Egypt, America, and Israel, including intelligence chiefs from the U.S. and Israel, all of them trying to come to some sort of deal to free the remaining more than 100 hostages in the Gaza Strip, of which many are already dead, as well as to bring some sort of peace to the Gaza Strip to halt Israel's assault there. Now, this has proved elusive for so many months. There was a burst of optimism last week about the prospects of a deal that Hamas had maybe budged on their abiding demand that if they are to release some of their hostages, that Israel will completely halt its fighting in the Gaza Strip. Now, we've heard from Israeli officials, especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that that is a non-starter. They will not agree to anything that doesn't allow them to renew their fight to completely dismantle Hamas. But it looks as though there is enough optimism that all of these countries have sent delegates to the Middle East, to Qatar. These negotiations are supposedly going to be moving on to Cairo in the coming days. It's yet to see whether this burst of optimism from just a couple of days ago could actually end in some sort of negotiated deal. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
And police in the UK have caught a man they say is a suspect in a triple murder, and the weapon they used, a crossbow. NBC News correspondent Danielle Himanjian has that story.
Well, this happened in an area called Bushy, about 20 miles northwest of London. Normally a quiet, leafy neighborhood, but tonight it is the scene of a triple murder investigation. Police are calling it a horrific incident. They were called to a property last night around 7 o'clock. They found 3 people seriously injured, all 3 women, all 3 believed to belong to the same family, and all 3 died shortly after. Police say that the suspect, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford, used a crossbow and possibly other weapons as well. The BBC has identified the victims as 61-year-old Carol Hunt and 2 daughters, both in their 20s, Louise and Hannah Hunt, and that they were the wife and daughters of sportscaster John Hunt, well known here in the UK. This triggered a massive manhunt in the region that lasted just about 24 hours. In the end, Kyle Clifford was found in a London cemetery near his home. Police say that no shots were fired when they captured him, though he was found with injuries, and so he is now being treated for those injuries, and no one else is being they're not looking for anybody else in connection with this investigation. Now, it is legal to carry a crossbow here, though not in public without what's called a reasonable excuse. Incidents are rare. Homicides by crossbow are rare, though there have been something like fewer than 10 cases over the course of a decade. But a review of UK laws began back in 2021 when a man tried to break into Windsor Castle to kill the late Queen Elizabeth II, and he was armed with a loaded crossbow.
So bizarre. Daniel, thank you. And still ahead, an NBC News exclusive, a construction worker who survived the Key Bridge collapse shares his story for the first time with our Tom Yamas. His thoughts as he plunged towards the water, not knowing how to swim.
Did you pray? Did you scream? Lo que dije fue gracias a Dios. Por la familia que me dio, que cuidará a mi esposa, mis hijos y a mi familia. Y pues obviamente pedí perdón por todo lo que haya hecho.
And welcome back. Here are some of the headlines happening out west that we're following right now. 2 Mexican-American icons of music had their stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame vandalized. Selena and Jenny Rivera both had their stars splashed with black paint twice this week, and videos quickly popped up online showing fans trying to scrub Rivera's star clean. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce says the stars have since been professionally cleaned and the police have been notified. And a man in Colorado has been infected with the bubonic plague. Health officials made that announcement on Monday, and they say he's in the hospital and his condition has improved. Officials say they don't know how the man was infected, but the disease is transmitted by fleas and often carried by rodents. The CDC says the U.S. gets about 7 cases of the plague a year, usually around the Southwest. And burglars posing as construction workers have been arrested in North Hollywood after breaking into a bunch of high-end homes. They called themselves the Reflector Vest Crew, and they were rounded up over the past few weeks following an LAPD investigation. Detectives say their plan of attack was to knock on doors in those vests, enter the houses when people weren't home, and then steal luxury items. The suspects have been charged with residential burglary and receiving stolen property. And now to an NBC News exclusive. It has been more than 3 months since that catastrophic Baltimore bridge collapse. And now speaking publicly for the first time since that day, a survivor of that collapse speaks with NBC News anchor Tom Yamas.
Hold on traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering.
When the cargo ship Dolly slammed into Baltimore's Key Bridge, causing it to collapse, 7 construction workers were hurled into the Patapsco River.
Like there is no bridge. Like there is no bridge.
6 of the workers would die, all but Julio Cervantes Schwartz.
This image is frozen in your head?
Sí.
Why? ¿Por qué?
Porque es el barco que...
It's the ship that destroyed 6 families, he says. For the first time, he's telling his story of survival. Just before 1:30 a.m., as the Dolly was making its way under the Key Bridge, Cervantes and his crew were on a break towards the middle of the bridge, eating in their vehicles.
There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we got to stop all traffic.
Though police had been alerted, Cervantes says they had no idea the 947-foot-long vessel was about to hit the bridge. He says suddenly everything started to shake. He witnessed his co-workers all slide into the water one by one, and then so did he.
Do you remember what was going through your head as you're falling into the water?
Pensé que...
I thought we might never get out, he says.
Did you pray? Did you scream?
Gracias a Dios.
He says he thanked God, asked him to take care of his wife and family, and asked for forgiveness for everything he'd done. When the frigid water started to fill his truck cabin, he realized he was alive. And luckily, his car had manual windows. He rolled one down and got out of his truck. But there was another problem.
Do you know how to swim?
No sé nadar.
Cervantes says he floated to a piece of the bridge lodged in the river and started to call out for his co-workers.
Alejandro, Dorian, Miguel.
But he heard nothing. Among those who died, his brother-in-law and his 18-year-old nephew, who he considered a son. He wishes he could have one last conversation with him and thank him for being part of his life.
Gracias por dejarme ser parte de su vida.
Lawyers representing 5 of the victims, including Cervantes, plan to file suit in the coming weeks against all companies involved with the ship. The NTSB has reported the ship had power trouble in the days leading to the disaster.
They had multiple issues, not just before hitting the bridge, but before even getting to this port.
Imagine being on a bridge and watching your friends and family members drop one by one by one before you.
Unimaginable. What a miracle he is alive. Tom Yamas, thank you. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. We are hearing from a pair of astronauts hanging out in space for a lot longer than they planned for. What the Boeing starliner crew is saying about their ship and the eventual return home, that's coming up in the future of space. Plus, straight out of, I don't know, a movie that hasn't been written yet, humanoids just took the spotlight at the World AI Conference. The race to make these robots more human-like is getting pretty intense, and CNBC's Kate Rooney is taking a deep dive and joins us to break it all down next. And tonight in the future of everything, the future for the Boeing starliner crew still at the ISS. NASA is insisting the 2 astronauts are not stuck and they will return in their ship. And engineers are working to understand the problems with their ship. But the question remains, when are they coming home? Here's NBC's Tom Costello.
Hello, everybody.
In their 35th day of what was supposed to be a 10-day mission, astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams insist they remain confident in their Starliner spaceship.
I have a real good feeling in my heart that the spacecraft will bring us home, no problem.
They've been on the space station far longer than anyone expected after a problem with the ship's thrusters as they approached the station. Engineers on the ground are working to replicate the problem. Made by Boeing, Starliner is on its maiden voyage. Billions of dollars over budget and delayed by engineering challenges. NASA wants to ensure the thrusters don't fail again when the astronauts return to Earth. It seems it's been snake bit at every turn. Are you confident in the performance of the ship for future missions as well?
This is the world of test. This is a tough business that we're in. Human spaceflight is not easy. In any regime, failure is not an option. That's why we are staying here now.
Mission managers still believe Starliner is safe and could be used in an emergency.
The prime option today is to return Butch and Sonny on Starliner. Right now, we don't see any reason that that wouldn't be the case.
Now targeting late July for Williams and Wilmore's homecoming. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Tom Costello with a very long-distance interview there. Tom, thank you. And tonight, we are also going deep on the robot revolution. Tech giants like Tesla and Amazon are throwing billions at a new generation of AI-powered humanoids, and it's not just about convenience. They say it's about solving a global labor shortage, and they say it's only a matter of time before we can buy one for ourselves. But with China already dominating the robot game, the pressure is on to build the best and the fastest. CNBC's Kate Rooney takes us inside that race.
This hardware has been around for decades. Companies like Boston Dynamics, Honda, Sony, and others have wowed the public with early versions of these robots.
Why would we want humanoids? The prevailing sort of answer has been the world is built to be occupied by humans.
So we want robots that are versatile, that can do a wide range of things. And having it adopt the humanoid form factor always made a lot of sense.
Recent leaps in artificial intelligence have resulted in leaps for robotics. The data that they use to train these robots, it's based in real-world scenarios. Now, a robot can be trained the same way a human is.
We have this technology called teleoperation. The person does the thing 200 times. We record all that data, and then we use that data to train these models. And the AI models are very similar to the GPT-style generative AI models. You feed in the 200 trajectories, and the system learns how the task is being done, and then the robot will do the task autonomously.
If I go into a new space, I'm now not looking at spending months trying to code that problem. I can potentially just generate it straight out of Gen AI and be able to have Digit interact with new objects and in new environments without having to develop it all.
AI models require massive quantities of data to train off of, and this is no different.
If you show the robot enough things, it starts to be able to do things that it hasn't been shown before.
Big tech is very interested in the big potential this technology promises.
If you're going to do AI at the frontier, you need to be partnered with Microsoft or NVIDIA or Google or one of the big players. There's just no other way. They have resources that nobody else has, even governments.
NVIDIA's been a great partner up until this point. We're using everything from their hardware to their simulation, and then recently have started working with them on foundation models as well.
One of this industry's biggest proponents is Elon Musk. He's made some bold predictions that Tesla's robot, Optimus, could propel it to a $25 trillion market cap, and that it will amount to a majority of Tesla's long-term value, with demand as high as 10 to 20 billion units.
Tesla is arguably the world's biggest robotics company because our cars are like semi-sentient robots on wheels. And with the full self-driving computer and all of the neural nets, it kind of makes sense to put that onto a humanoid form. And it's intended to be friendly, of course, and navigate through a world built for humans and eliminate dangerous, repetitive, and boring tasks.
Digit, created by Oregon-based Agility Robotics, is helping Amazon in early-stage testing at its Sumner, Washington Fulfillment Center and Innovation Lab.
We've been working with them recycling totes.
The arms are capable of handling a wide variety of different payloads, up to about 33-ish pounds.
We envision an app store for robots out in the future where if you need tote recycling app, you can go into the app store and download that onto your robot.
And according to the company, there is plenty of demand. Agility is building a factory in Salem, Oregon to keep up with orders.
We call it RoboFab. We'll be online this summer. In a few years, have a capacity of about 10,000 robots per year.
And where will those go for the most part?
To many, many customers, but largely initially in the logistics, warehousing space. The next big market we see is automotive, retail, and then eventually into markets like healthcare.
Several other startups are developing similar humanoid robots. Sanctuary AI, launched in 2018 in Vancouver, Canada, unveiled its latest robot last year. Phoenix, a 5'7" robot capable of lifting up to 55 pounds. It looks a bit different from other humanoid designs, trading its legs for wheels.
Robots with legs, the upper body, including the hands, have to be very weak and light. So instead of doing that, we put our product on a wheeled base. And because we made that trade-off, we can build very powerful, very precise, very fast motors in the upper body.
The company deployed early iterations of its robot with Canadian Tire, completing front and back of store tasks such as picking and packing merchandise.
Robots were asked to do everything from greeting people when they come through the door to actually putting things on trucks.
What would you tell those people who, there are certain jobs that might be lost as a result of this?
Actually, we've heard from some of those people, and what their jobs start to evolve into is the manager of the robot fleet.
There are just some jobs that people don't want. Proponents say a humanoid can help fill those.
There's about 10 million open jobs in the United States alone. We could build and maintain 10 million of the robots that we're talking about without touching a single job.
If you have to lift sort of 55 pounds somewhere between 50 and 100 times an hour, that's a serious workout. So we're taking these dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs first.
How far away are we from Digit doing your laundry?
That's probably more along the lines of, a decade or more.
And Kate Rooney joins us now. Kate, that story looked less like a news story and more like the beginning of, I don't know, like a Hollywood movie. I have so many thoughts, but first off, let's talk about China real quick, because there are some videos like this that I keep seeing that come out of the World AI Conference in Shanghai, and then I'm like, actually, just take a look at this. I mean, that doesn't look like a great idea, but it shows what they're capable of. What is China showing us?
It's interesting, Gadi. So China really is leading the race essentially by a mile. So it's kind of ironic in some ways because the U.S. was an early leader. A lot of the innovation early on came out of the U.S., but China right now at this point is the largest installer of industrial robots. It accounts for about half of the global total at this point, according to at least one report. One benefit that they've had and one reason they've been able to pull forward is because it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to manufacture there, so they're closer to factories. They can produce at much lower cost. So it's kind of similar in terms of what you see in electric vehicles, for example, in the same dynamic where they've really been able to do this at a much lower cost so they can spread this out, sell these more easily, and that's really the big dynamic. Cost is the big takeaway for China. They've also taken a sort of different path on design. If you looked at some of the videos, they have done a lot more of this realistic facial features. They've just gone in a totally different direction than a lot of the U.S. companies, which have gone with sort of just the faceless robot. But in China, people are a lot more comfortable with more lifelike interactions, and it really is subjective. It depends on who you ask. Some people say it's creepy, reminds them of Westworld, but they seem a lot more comfortable with that, and that's kind of the direction they're going in China.
Yeah, no uncanny valley there, I guess. It does seem like Tesla is standing its ground, though, showing off Optimus 2.0, if I saw that right. What's the promise of Optimus there?
Yeah, so Elon Musk has really gone all in on this. In a lot of ways, it makes sense because Tesla, as he's described it, is sort of a robotics company. These cars, as he's described them, are sentient robots on wheels. So the leap from making a car like a Tesla to a humanoid robot, at least in the mind of Musk, it's not a far jump. And so he thinks that this is going to push Tesla to a $25 trillion market cap, at least according to Elon Musk. He thinks the majority of the company's long-term value is going to come from these robots. So he is really going all in on this. There are skeptics out there, of course. There are people that doubt Elon Musk. He's known for these really bold ideas, but a lot of people that also, wouldn't bet against him.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until you go from riding in a Tesla to, I don't know, your kids riding on the back of an Optimus. It seems like a very wild future. I also saw that China has put together their first set of regulations on humanoids. What do those look like? It's so weird to talk about humanoids, but when it comes to humanoid legislation, what could it look like here in the United States?
It's going to be tricky, Gadi. So regulation, I mean, it's similar to what you see in AI. There's really no international standards. They've been looked at, but they haven't been agreed upon. And then in the U.S., a lot of these robots are being deployed in warehouses. So organizations like OSHA are really the workplace safety groups that need to approve the deployment of these robots, make sure these aren't accidents. I mean, these are powerful machines that could really do a lot of damage. So they need to get approval here in the U.S., and they're already being rolled out. Amazon is one of the biggest companies that's doing this. They need to get the same approvals, in the U.S. that they would with any sort of industrial robotics approval. So it's interesting. There's some existing infrastructure, but on a global scale, there's no sort of agreement. It's going to be a bit of a mess, according to experts, in terms of how to get agreement on a global scale. But they also don't want the U.S. to fall behind. There's geopolitical implications.
Okay, I just can't stop watching this video. and think OSHA's going to be in charge of that. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully we'll see a lot more when it comes to regulation and a little bit of thought-out regulation here in the United States. But fascinating stuff all around. Kate, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.